Hello everyone and welcome to another television video about the upcoming patches coming with the Raid on Drvar DLC. This is all still work in progress and it might be subject to change, but overall this patch will be focused on buffing the divisions that have really low win rate and are struggling on the bottom. As the last patch, we nerfed the top end with Makers with Task Force 45, so now we bring up the bottom tier a bit to get everything a bit closer together. And with that in mind, let's get started with the patches. As it's mostly focused around divisions, there are a few general changes. One of them being that 120mm mortars now come with 30 HE shells instead of 20, so you can fire a bit longer with them before bringing in a resupply truck. So maybe bringing them in A is a bit more viable, but having a supply truck in Bs and things like that. Mostly focused towards team games where these are already underused a bit. Now you might want to use them a bit more. Quite capable things, especially with radio, but the ones without radio are kind of okay as well. Sadly, only the third VDV gets them with radio. Let's move now on to the Soviets, as they are the only faction that gets general buffs. First of them being Strelkovy SVT. Now, costs only 20 points. As you can see, it's in quite a lot of Soviet divisions. And most of them, or nearly all of them, only get one card. So it's not a major buff, but the general point was to buff Soviets across the board, and we didn't want to touch their main infantry, like buffing Strelkies, giving them SVTs back or so on might be too strong, especially as you have a lot of cards of Strelkies, so their mainline infantry would be annoying. This way, you now have one elite card of units to choose from with the Strelky SVTs, and that you have to decide where to put it in your deck. And in which phase you want to bring in infantry that is a bit more cost efficient maybe than other infantry squads. And that's what the Strelky SVT for. Another unit that has the same treatment now is the classic Strachwitz squad, as it also comes in divisions, in the guard divisions that don't already have Strelky SVTs. The only division that has both is the Moskaya Kupa Baktina. And that one is quite weak, so it can take both patches. The Strachwitz now are 30 points for the same reason. It's low number of cards, and you now will have one elite card of Strachwitz, basically one really cost-efficient card of Strachwitz that you can choose where to bring, in what phase, and what to do with them. Some of them get 2 cards of Strachwitz, but they only come with pretty low availability. So yeah, your Strachwitz will be really good, but you have to still bring them in wisely. It's not just a spam unit, like for example Guardia or Strelky would be if we would touch them. The next general buff for the Soviets is the Sturmoviki. The Sturmoviki rocks will go down to 30 points. They are not 30 points just yet here, but they will go down to 30 points. This is because most other double flamer squadrons are 30 points, or double flamer with TNT units of the Italians are 30 points as well, with mostly more hit points even, like the double flamer of the Romanians have 10 hit points, for example, and so on. The new German one in the Drvar has smoke grenades and 8 hit points, so it is only fair that the Sturmoviki rocks also go to a similar level. They will be quite strong, but also relatively low card availability. So that's the reason why we did it. Buffing them slightly, why Eugen did it. Buffing the Soviets slightly across the board, without giving them like super amount of good baseline infantry. You still have to choose wisely where to bring in the good units. And that's it with the generic patches for this. Now we come in to buffs that go into the divisions. And let's go over to the divisions that are buffed directly. First division to get a buff is 19th Strlekovy Corpus. The buff here is rather simple, and it's two ways. They might get more buffs later on. For now, there's buffs is around the support tab. First of all, the support slots got cheaper. No 4 points here in the end anymore. The more 2 cost slots instead of 3 cost slots. So you can afford a couple more support slots, and you can fill them with a bit more now, as you get a second card of SU-152, one of the best Soviet support equipments you can have. They have 2 cards now of them, limited to only A and B, but you can now take one in A, one in B, for example, and have some nice fire support. And Mech teams now are available in A, B, C. This is trying to help the division out that you can't really buff in the infantry or tank tab without going against the storyline of the division, which is that they're like low on tanks, low on infantry, 1 down division, but that they had quite a substantial amount of support equipment, and yeah, that's how we do it. Did it. Might still need more buffs, but this is how we do it. How we did it. SU-152 should be pretty helpful. It's a really good gun. Maybe the best unit you can have in Soviet support tab. 2000 meter range HE and solid frontal armor, helping out quite a lot. The next unit, let's go into the next division that got buffed. The next division that got buffed is 7th Mechanized Corpus. Here only a small change has been done. They now got another 2 cost infantry slot. So they can bring a bit more infantry a bit cheaper, as they are a mechanized unit formation. That just made sense. Yeah. As I said, divisions we buffed were mainly divisions with low win rate or low pick rate in general. And yeah, one of them was 7 mechanized. Next division that got a slight buff is Group Tyurina. Really only got a slight buff outside of the generic Soviet buffs. And that slight buff is that the P3 and the both P3 rocket planes are cheaper, as these are the only heavier support aircraft that this division gets, and they were quite pricey for the efficiency of their rockets. They might still not be amazing, but at least they are now slightly cheaper, both 10 points from 130 to 120 and from 120 to 110. Yeah, those are the changes to Group Tyurina, so also slightly better. Then Bezuglogo got also a 2 cost infantry slot added to its layout, so it also now can bring a bit more infantry, as it was nerfed back in the day, if I remember correctly. As you can see, it still has 5 cost slots over here, so yeah, the slot curve of this division before was really atrocious. Now it's slightly better, and you get Strelkovy SVTs and Strachwitz in this division, so overall Bezuglogo got buffed quite significantly. Next division to receive a small change is the Group Fedyukina, their special infantry unit. The Strelkovy DT now is on par with something like the SS Legionaries, as it's now an 8-man squadron instead of a 7-man squadron, so they are quite a bit more viable. It is now worthwhile bringing them in this division. And as they don't get Strelkovy SVTs or Strachwitz, they needed a slight buff to the infantry as well, so buffing their unique unit just made sense. And now this one should be somewhat worthwhile bringing for sure, as SS Legionaries or your carries are quite solid, and so should this one be now. Then Moskaya Kupabaktina, one of the divisions, together with Bezuglogo, one of the divisions that gets Strelkovys and Strachwitz, also 2 cards of Strachwitz, so yeah, good in that regard. And then a bigger change to Moskaya Kupabaktina is they now have 25mm AA in A phase, and as they are a division really based around air superiority and gaining it, this helps out a lot. So you can now get solid AA in A, then you can get your 37mm in B phase, and with these two combined you can achieve air superiority easier, which you kinda need. Like, this division is all about infantry and air, obviously, with only 1 tank card that also comes only in B. It's quite limited in that regard. Support tab also nothing major, so it needs to be a bit better in the air, and that it should be now. And then we come to 358th Strlekovy. 358th Strlekovy now has one new unit. It's one of two divisions that received a completely new unit. And that completely new unit for 358 is a VG-Vod PTR with 2 Lattis. Currently it has 3 modules. The stat card is the right one. They will fix that till launch. It has TNT, it has Lattis, it has smoke. So for 20 points, this is a really, really capable squadron of anti-tank rifles. Latti being one of the best out there. High rate of fire, solid penetration, and smoke and TNT obviously pretty good as well. So it will really buff 358's anti-tank capabilities, and it is a nice, lovely, unique unit, making a pretty interesting division a bit more flavorful again as well. So great addition here, really big fan of this new unit, and I like that Eugen still does stuff like this to give some older divisions some flavor. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to talk about earlier, the SVT like equivalent of the Estonians also is now 20 points, and they get 2 cards of them. They are the only division that actually gets 2 cards of basically Strelky SVTs. For them it's the Las Kurit SVTs, so it's a significant buff for them for sure. You can take 1 in A, 1 in B, and they come with solid firepower for 20 points. They should be pretty solid on the mid-ranges. Let's move on. Now we come to the only nerf in this patch, as they didn't get hit before, and it's a nerf to 2 divisions, one of them being the second Indian head, the other one being first DFL, and they share 1 unit, and that unit being the M3 howitzer. So yeah, DFL and second Indian head, pretty high performing divisions, and the howitzer was insanely cost efficient at 45 points. Now it went up 10 points to 55 points, so it should be a bit less cost efficient. It will still be really good though, as its heat shell does 10 damage, so it one-shots medium tanks with 130 penetration, and its HE shell with 2000 meter range is really, really good as well. It's still 5 points cheaper than IG-33 for example, so it's at a pretty good spot I would say now, and it nerfs 2 divisions that are slightly overperforming, so a good change here as well. A Western Allied division that got some buffs is the 15th Scots infantry. It got buffed in 2 ways. First, its AEC Mark III now has slightly better availability. It went from quite a bit better availability. It went from 2 in A, 4 in B, 8 in C to skipping the A phase in 2 and making it 4 and making the B phase 8. And so it all moved 1 phase forward basically. And with its pretty solid capabilities, somewhat close to a Puma, it should be a viable option now to bring around. Obviously not quite as fast as a Puma and so on, but should be a pretty decent armored car, helping out the 15th in the mobile combat that they lack a bit in the tank department due to the Churchills. So yeah, good change there. And another change is that they got back their Typhoon Mark 1B anti-tank rocket planes that they had a long time ago. And yeah, they are back here as well. So yeah, welcome back, Typhoon. I hope you Scots players out there will play around with these toys again. Next division to get buffed is a division that was really OP back in the day, but currently is heavily struggling, and that one being the 3rd Canadian Infantry. And it got buffed in 2 of its unique units, first of them being the Stormtroopers. They now cost 15 points, and they're pretty much on par with the Field Engineers. You get slightly less availability, you get a bit more CQC firepower and 1 more hit point, so it's just fair that they are the same price. Like, these guys get 7 on 1-star veterancy, these get 5 on 1-star veterancy, but they have a bit more SMG firepower and 1 more hit point. So it's now a choice, and you could maybe also just take both. But the Stormtroopers now are actually viable. At 20 points, they really weren't. And then the second change, you gotta go to this. The Kangaroo now only costs 10 points. So it is quite good armored carrier now. It cost 15 points before, Now it's 10. So the unique unit here of the Canadians got buffed. As you can see, most of the time we focus the buffs here on the specific units of divisions to really just give that division a boost, to not go too much across the board, like not buffing rifles again and so on, because yeah, that's quite risky. If you buff Commonwealth rifles, quite a couple of divisions might get too strong. Same with the Soviet infantry. Let's move on to another division, and the next one on the list is Armia Krajowa. Armia Krajowa got quite a couple of changes. First of them being that they have one unique unit, just like the Kangaroo, got buffed. That's the wrong unit here that I choose. The Kubus now only costs 5 points instead of 15. So it's a quite cost efficient unit now. It's still pretty slow, so you still have the problem with that, but it's still having a DT and a Piat, so it can deal with light armor of the enemy, and it can help you out as a cheap light fire support unit now. Because for 15 points it was really not worthwhile bringing around. So yeah, the 3 Kubus you can use now in a cost efficient way. So that's the first change. Second change is in the tank tab. They're Tigers. Now, they're one Tiger, not the Tigers. The Tigres, the one Tiger of them, now comes in A-phase. So they have a bit more firepower in A-phase with this big boy coming around. Then in the infantry tab, somewhat similar to the Stormtroopers, their CQC squadron with shitty SMGs was quite overpriced at 25 points. It has a TNT, but it is an 8-man squad with shitty SMGs, so it went down to 20 points. And that should make it a bit more viable as a TNT squadron in forest fights and so on, and should be a bit more cost efficient. Another unit that got a bit more cost efficient also carries TNT, and it also carries a bazooka, Panzerschreck, and that's the Sabotachi. These 6-man squad with TNT and Panzerschreck went from 30 to 25 points to help out the Armia Krajowa a bit. And then the last change is that for now it wasn't implemented, but they might merge the 2 Yak-9 cards into one, so that you get 2 Yak-9 in A instead of 1 per card, so that your air slots are a bit less clogged, and that this card actually might be worth it. This change is not yet implemented. They might change air a bit differently, but there will be a slight buff to the early game air of Armia Krajowa as well. Should help out this division from coming out from the really low bottom of the tier list to somewhat more closer to the center. And now we move over to the Axis. And in the Axis we start with 116th Panzer. And 116th Panzer got 2 changes in the infantry segment. First of all, they got one cost infantry slot, so they have slightly more infantry to bring. Like the first 5 slots are now somewhat affordable instead of only the first 4, and then you can maybe take the 6th. The 7th is already pretty pricey. And then they also got the second new unique unit that was added to multiplayer or to decks. This one already existed in single player in some campaigns, and that one is the Ersatz Pioneer. It is a standard Pioneer squad with MG42, TNT, 8 K98s, but it is disheartened. It also has some nice uniforms. If you compare them, yeah, it's the classic, or they just look a bit different in how they stand around. Yeah, but the Ersatz Pioneers are around here now, and Ersatz Pioneers should be quite helpful in cleaning out enemy infantry in the early game, together with the cheaper slots, making 116th a bit more efficient in this regard. The availability currently obviously is still subject to change, because 18 on TNT squadrons in A-phase is a bit OP. They might change to something like 12-18 or 9-18, like 12 in A or 9 in A and then 18 in B, to make them a bit more balanced. Yeah, that's that part of the 116th change. And then another slight change is that the Mittelwagen, you get now 2 cards. You can't take them in C anymore, but you get 2 cards with the similar availability as before, 2 in A, 4 in B. So you can now take 1 card in A, 1 card in B, then you have 6 mobile wagons spread out, and you don't have to wait till C phase to actually get some AA. So yeah, that's another buff there, or another change that I would call a buff. I hope you agree. Let's move on to the next division. 116 for sure needed some love, and I'm really happy it got it. Might now be once more one of my favorite divisions. Let's move on. Next divisions that got buffed are Strachwitz and Großdeutschland, and that one of their unique units got slightly buffed again. The SDKFZ 251-9D, it didn't got any buffs when the light tanks got buffed, and before it was really cost efficient before the light tank buff, but it fell down a bit. And Strachwitz needs a really cost efficient unit because the rest of its division is slightly inefficient in that regard. So this one went from 30 to 25. Simple change, buffing Strachwitz and Großdeutschland slightly. Both, like Strachwitz kinda underperforming, Großdeutschland in the middle of the pike. So I think it's a good change to help those two divisions out. And yeah, giving them a bit more of that armored push feeling that they are supposed to be. Let's move on to the next division. And if Panzer Grenadier got one simple change. It got one slot cost card of infantry. So yeah, it will be able to be a bit more of a Panzer Grenadier than a tank and Panzer division, and that it has now a bit of availability on its infantry guard. Still not insanely good, still lower than other mechanized formations, but at least slightly better than tank divisions like the 116th. So, oh yeah, you can bring in your Panzer Grenadiers a bit more numerous now. Another division that got buffed is Gruppe Harteneck. It got one slight buff in its anti-tank slot costs. It went from 11233 to 11123. So these two slots here got a bit cheaper. So you can afford anti-tank guns a bit more. And as this division has some really nice anti-tank option, that should make you want to take a couple more maybe. And use these lovely Jagdpanzer 38Ts. And the other change to Harteneck, that is also a slight buff to 14th, if I remember correctly, is the ME 410 A1 U4 went from 140 to 130 points. So it's a bit more cost efficient. And they have another better option against anti-tank. So this division that has solid infantry now also has better anti-tank. Obviously, the issue of having shitty AA will stay, so Harteneck should still be a better division now, but still not anywhere close the top tier. But that's the goal here. It's not creating a new S tier division. The goal of these patches is to just make the shittier divisions more viable, more fun to play, and overall level the playing field a bit more. And that's also the case with 52nd Sicherungs, a division that needed love maybe the most. 19th Panzer or 19th Tank Division of the Soviets comes to mind as well. Like those two might be the lowest divisions currently. And this one gets quite a couple of buffs. First of one is not implemented yet, but it's supposed to be here, is TARS going down to 15 points again. So they have a really cheap or like pretty cost efficient infantry unit again with the TARS. That should help them out. Still not quite as good as the British converted gunner in Task Force 45. So yeah, that should still be okay here, as you also only get 2 cards. Yeah, that's the first one. Second one being that in the support tab they now have Fallschirmjäger Flammenwerfer. So that one will help out a bit. Then next one, the artillery slots are a bit cheaper, so you can afford to bring in around these guns a bit more to either help you out hitting the enemy with artillery and also having some more AP options. Obviously these are somewhat makeshift AP options, but they will still help you out with like light tanks breaking through and so on. So you can have these somewhat closer to the front line and then have them fire into the enemy, which you already needed to do before, and now you can afford it a bit better. And the next change is that another form of anti-tank is available for them now. They now got another version of the F8. They got the anti-tank version, the Panzerblitz rocket version. That should help them out dealing with enemy tanks or vehicles overall a bit better, which is obviously one of the biggest weaknesses in a division that gets its first tanks in B phase with one card of Aufklärungspanther Ds, and then got all the rest in D phase with Panther Ace and Jagdpanzers, and has really lackluster anti-tank before that. So all of this should help out the division somewhat, and it will be a bit more playable. It should still not be anywhere close the upper echelon of divisions, but at least it might not be the weakest anymore, and even if it is, it will still be better. The next buff hits a division that I already had a place close to my heart, and that is 122nd Infantry, and it's a division with two pretty unique units, and those two pretty unique units got buffed. First of, or like unique units to this division. First of them is the Zombie Poseid. The Zombie Poseid got the price treatment. They now are 20 points, so they are really close to your carries and SS Legionaries or the buffed Strelkovy DTs of Fedyukina. They are a 9-man squadron. They have an LMG over the Yakaris, which obviously makes them slightly stronger than the Yakaris, but also a bit harder to use because you open fire earlier and it's not the best LMG anyway. So yeah, and it's an automatic rifle, so it will help you out in CQC as well. So overall, this division has now a pretty good CQC unit with the Zombie Poseid, and its mid-range unit, its unique MG44 unit in form of the Sturmgrenadiers, got an availability buff. It went from 6, 12, 18 to 8, 16, 0, because otherwise it would have too many. Like if it would go to 8, 16, 24, it would be historically inaccurate in the amount of Sturmgrenadiers it could bring. So this way, the amount of Sturmgrenadiers you can maximum bring stays similar, but you get them a bit more card efficient and a bit earlier. Also, the first level of veterancy is somewhat viable as well, going from 8 to 5 or from 16 to 11. So these are pretty useful now as well, and should help out a division that is based around having solid infantry and actually having solid infantry. Obviously the division otherwise brings in some lovely Stooks, but it doesn't have any light armor. And another unit that got buffed, not just for them, but for all Finnish formations, is the Tyurina. It went down from 35 to 30 points, which might not even be necessary in here, in this division, but for the Armia Krajowa, it might be the best. And then the last change, which is not supposed to be buff, but rather it like changed to being somewhat more historical accurate, and one that is also for sure maybe subject to change, is that Lovas Tyurins, Lovas being a division that currently performs quite well, so it doesn't need a direct buff. But Tyurins are somewhat close to Panzer IIIs and so on, and Panzer IIIs have 10 hit points. And so Tyurins, it makes only sense to have 10 hit points as well. So they now have 10 hit points. But they come with 5 points more cost, so they are slightly less. You can spam them slightly less, but they bring more bang for the buck per unit. So I'm not sure if this might make them a bit too strong. Maybe they need to go up 5 points more. We will have to test that. And yeah, interested to see your opinion on this as well. So yeah, as you can see, all these changes will hit a lot of divisions and a lot of the underwhelming divisions. I hope you agree. And if you feel like something is missing, or if you have any other interesting suggestions, feel free to let them down below in the chat. I hope you liked the video, and yeah, I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.